simplest one, so that's one of the reasons why we do it first, is it's just basically two parts, the theme and the rheem. Now, that maybe seems too simple, but the reason why theme is important, theme is the speaker's starting point. It's when you're speaking, when you're saying something, so like I've given you some examples here, you know, the lion chased the unicorn all around the town, the lion chased the unicorn. By the lion, the unicorn was chased all around the town. The unicorn was chased all around the town by the lion. All of these are possible orders that you can pick. And it's not random. You would use one of those orders in a particular context to achieve a certain purpose, right? So communication, you're trying to achieve a certain purpose. You're trying to get the person to understand something. And so you don't just throw a bunch of words together in any way that you want. You just, well, you do it the way you want, but you do it for a reason. There's a purpose for the way you do it. And the first thing you say is important because people don't sit and wait for you to finish speaking before they start processing, before they start understanding what you're saying, right? The way we process, you know, so the first word you hear, you start creating a context. The way we understand what somebody is saying is we create a context in which what they're saying kind of makes sense. And so the first word that they hear, we start what we call projecting. You start projecting where the person is going. You're already guessing what they're going to say. This is why you can finish people's sentences for them sometimes. Or they don't even have to finish the sentence. They can just say something and then just drop off, and you will still know what they intended to say because it's predictable. Or we say you can project what they're going to say. So the initial starting point gives them this kind of base for the projection. And so it's not only giving them the base for projection, but it's also the beginning of their interpretation, the beginning of their creation of the context in which they're trying to make sense. So whatever you say first influences everything, their interpretation of everything that follows it. So it's crucially important what comes first, because it will influence the overall interpretation of everything. And particularly in English, the thing that comes first is the topic. This is not true in all languages, but in English, the topic is generally the main thing we're going to be talking about is what we call the topical theme. There are other things that we'll talk about as thematic, but the main thing is the topical theme. So it's what we are talking about. So when you say like the lion chased the unicorn all around the town, you're talking about what the lion did, right? So your main focus of attention is the lion. Okay, what about the lion? Oh, it chased the unicorn around the town. And then if you start with all around the town, the lion chased the unicorn, then you're kind of starting with, okay, what happened all over the town? Or if you say, by the lion, the unicorn was chased around the town, again, you have the lion in there, but it's more of a different aspect of it. More of it's not so much what happened to the lion, but what did the lion do? Because the by there means, you know, it gives it kind of this agentiveness, this doingness. And then the unicorn was chased around the town. Then you're starting with the unicorn as the thing you're talking about. So this influences the rest of the, you know, the interpretation of the rest of it. It's all relative to that first thing. So that's why there's this big break between the theme and rheem. And then the simple themes, like the ones I've given here, they only contain topical theme, which the topical theme will identify as some participant, process, or circumstance. Now, these are technical terms in this theory. Process, just as I mentioned last time, is just what's happening, whether it's a, you know, a doing or a being or a happening kind of thing. So we normally represent those with verbs. So that's a process. Participant is the person or thing that's involved in the action. So if I pull this cord, so I'm involved, I'm a participant, and the cord is a participant, right? So these are two different participants within that action of I pulled the cord. And the process is pulling. And then the circumstance is kind of the when, where, how, and why. So I pull the cord while standing here, or I pull the cord with my hand. So how I did it was with my hand. Where I did it was I was standing here and pulled the cord or something like that. So you can add this extra information about the when, where, how, and why, and that's the circumstances of the action. So those are the things like all around the town would be a circumstance. The lion would be a participant. By the lion is also a participant, but in this case actually presented as if it's a circumstance. And then the unicorn is again a participant. Okay. So it's a relatively simple concept. Basically, what you're talking about, and then the rheem is what you're saying about it. Now, it's actually part of a more complicated theory developed many years ago, where it's more the speaker, it's not just topic comment, although in English it kind of works out that way. It's more the speaker's starting point, and then the rheem is kind of more the new information. That's so we can't just understand something completely new. I think I mentioned this last time. You always have to relate something new to something that you already know. And this is part of the structure of the theme rheem as well, because the theme is generally going to be something that you already kind of are familiar with, or it gives you a base in which to make sense of the rheem, the rest of what's coming. And this is a general principle of cognition, that we can't just understand something totally out of the blue. We always have to have it related to something else. And this is, of course, as I mentioned, why education is cumulative. You can't just start off teaching a bunch of new stuff. You have to little by little build up that base in which the child can assimilate more and more information. So the theme is the base in which the rest of the information is assimilated. And we'll see that this is a general principle of communication generally. Now, in English, we have grammaticalized mood. Now, what that means, we're going to talk more about mood in the next lecture, which is part of the interpersonal action, but it's when you're speaking with somebody, you're doing something with them. Either you're asking for information, you're telling them information, you're ordering them to do something, or they're ordering you to do something, you know, these kind of things going on between the two. Now, these are reflected grammatically in English by what we call grammatical mood. And so you have the interrogative mood, so you're asking a question. You have the imperative mood, you're giving an order. And you have declarative mood, which is just making a statement. Now, these are particular grammatical structures in English. Not all languages have particular structures like this, but English does, and this is all we're worried about right now. So, indicative just comes from a Latin word meaning to state something. So it's the same, it comes from the word to say, dicare. And so indicative includes both the declaratives, making a statement, and the interrogative, asking a question. But it generally means something about facts, whereas the imperative and the subjunctive are not about facts. We're not going to talk about subjunctive because in English it's not a big deal anymore. But in other languages you may, if you studied some Indo-European languages, you may hear about subjunctive mood. That's kind of things that aren't real. And we do have a little bit of that in English, but I'm not really going to go into it because it's kind of a minor part of the language now. We've lost a lot of our morphology. So the main ones we worry about in English are the declarative, the interrogative, and the imperative. And the reason why I'm talking about it today is there's an interaction between the theme rheem structure and this mood structure. And it's an important thing. It's one of the ways that languages differ is this particular type of interaction. So, for example, in a declarative, the unmarked theme is always going to be the subject. And so when you hear a sentence like, the boy lost his notebook, again, you start to project when you first hear the theme, you're already projecting what's happened, or what's going to happen, or what the person's going to say. So you know, first of all, the boy is the topic, and that's who you're going to be saying something about the boy. But you also know something right away, which is that it's a statement, because the theme is a noun phrase, it's the subject. If you hear a noun phrase in first position, you know, a noun basically like boy, if you hear that in first position, you know that what's coming is a statement. So you know right away, right with the first word, you know what kind of interaction the speaker is attempting with you. This is a brilliant system. Right away, the speaker is telling you two things with the first. This is why theme is so important. Because with the first word, you're already being told, I'm going to tell you something about the boy, and it's going to be a statement about the boy. It's not going to be a question. It's not going to be an order. It's going to be a statement about the boy. So that's kind of brilliant that English has grammaticalized the system for doing this. It's not like this in all languages, but there are things similar in some other languages, but it's possible to do things very differently, but I'm not going to go into it in this class. So when you say the boy lost his notebook, the boy is the subject, it's the theme here. The cup was smashed to pieces. So here again, you hear a noun phrase. Now in this case, the noun phrase is the subject. It's not the doer of the action. Normally, the doer would be the subject, but in this case, it's a passive, so the cup becomes the subject. And but again, the importance of the fact that in the declarative, the theme is the subject, is that it's telling you this information right off the bat. So it helps you to project what's coming down the thing, and helping you to project helps you to understand what the speaker is trying to say. So this is why even if you're in a noisy place and you don't hear everything the person said, you kind of can guess what they're going to say or what's going on. And there's also a kind of exclamative declarative where you say something like, how lovely you look, or what a bizarre outfit that is, or how silly that is, or he is. So these are another kind of thing where, again, as soon as you hear this type of expression like how silly or how lovely or whatever, right away with the first word you know it's an exclamation, and you know what the person's doing with you. It is a declarative type, but it's a special type where the person you know is just telling you their feeling about this particular situation that they're talking about. Now, in the interrogative, there's also the same kind of thing going on, but in interrogative, there are two types of interrogative in English. There's the yes-no interrogative, and then there's what we call a WH interrogative, or interrogative word interrogative. Now, the way these work is that in English, to have a yes-no interrogative, it's what we call polarity. Polarity just means yes or no, and so it's sometimes called a polarity question or yes-no question. The first thing you hear is what's called the finite element in the clause. So in this case, you have the finite verbal operator, which just means this kind of auxiliary verb. If you studied any grammar in school, you would have learned this as auxiliary verbs like is or do or have in some cases. So what happens in English is when we ask a question that's a yes-no type question, we invert the order of the subject and this tense auxiliary. So in English, the system that's developed is that these words carry not only the polarity but the tense. And the tense, what tense does is tell you the time of the action you're talking about relative to the time of speaking. Not all languages mark that, but English marks that. And it does it on these auxiliary verbs. The main verb is not tense. The main verb actually is just a noun most of the time. Like he is eating. Eating is actually a noun. The tense is on the verb is. And so so this is it's called finite because by limiting the time when the action happened, it's not infinite. You know, we have the infinitival verb. It means it's infinite. It means it can be at any time. Whereas finite means it's constrained to a particular time. So that means it's tense. That's basically just another word for tense. So when we talk about the finite element, we're talking about this item that marks tense. So in English, it happens to be these auxiliary verbs like is and have and do. And we use those to carry the tense. Like if I say, I am eating, or I am going to go now, you know, there's this am or is or whatever. That's carrying the tense in a normal sense. And normally, if it's a declarative, it would come after the subject. But in an interrogative, we reverse that order. So we say, are you coming? You know, am I happy? You know, you reverse the order. So what's brilliant about this is, again, going back to the function of theme as the speaker's starting point, as soon as you hear a word like is or are or have as the first thing you hear, followed by the subject, then you know right away it's a polarity question. You know right away it's the speaker is asking you for a yes or no answer. That's brilliant, right? So you can project immediately what's happening. You know, you can know right away what's happening between you and the speaker. the speaker is asking you yes or no. And then you just have to pay attention to what it is that they're asking yes or no about. So if you say, you know, did you eat yet? Then as soon as you hear the did, then you know right away that it's going to be a yes or no question, and then followed by the you. And then, does he like ice cream? Same thing. Can I do it? So in all of these cases, it's the same pattern. So here the theme, and in this case, we include both of these two as the theme. And we'll talk more about this in a minute, why this part we consider part of the interpersonal meaning. This is not the topic, and so this is the topic. The you, he, or I is the topic, and so that's our topical theme. And we're going to be talking about this more, but everything that comes before the topical theme is also part of the theme, but the main part of the theme is the topical theme. So in this case, it's the same function, the same idea, that the theme is the thing that's helping you to understand what the speaker's trying to do. In what way is he trying to interact with you? And if it's a WH question, it's exactly the same kind of thing. But in this case, the thing that comes first is the WH word, the question word. So the where, when, how, why, who, the kind of word. So again, as soon as you hear that word, you know right away it's going to be a question. So you know that the speaker is attempting to interact with you in a particular way, is asking you a question. And you know right away what type of information is being asked for. When, where, how, why. All of these are types of information. And you know right away, okay, this is what the speaker is demanding. They're demanding this particular kind of information. Now, again, not all languages do this. English has this thing where we always put the WH word in initial position. And this is why we do it, is because it's one way of helping the hearer to know right away what the speaker is all about, what they're doing, why are they saying what they're saying. So right away, it's an immediate clue that in the case of an interrogative word like who left the cat out, you know, as soon as you hear who, you know right away, okay, they're asking me who did something, you know, or what happened, you know, something like that. It's about a person. And then what are we having for dinner? You know, as soon as you hear the word what, you kind of know what's going on and that they're asking for some kind of participant, some information about some participant, what. And then where did he say we're going? Then you know it's about some kind of circumstance. So what place is going to be happening. So this is all a really nice, neat system. And it's a functional system in the sense that it creates certain meaning, or it helps to create certain meaning. And so this is why we consider the theme-rheem structure to be a functional structure, because it has this function and creates or modifies the way that the person creates meaning. You know, the meaning is not in the words. The meaning is created in your mind as you hear the words. And hearing the words in different order, you're going to create different meanings. And so this is why, you know, the different theme-rheem structures that we're going to look at will create different meanings. Now, the imperative is when you're telling somebody to do something. And again, if you're telling somebody to do something, the most relevant information is what that you want them to do. So what's the most logical thing to put in the theme? The verb, right? So in this case, the unmarked or most usual type of imperative is just the verb. So, you know, it starts with the theme is the verb. So sit down, eat. In a negative, you have the negative finite element. So you say, don't sit down, or don't eat, or don't eat yet, you know, something like that. So then you have the negative thing followed by the verb, rather than followed by a subject like in a yes-no interrogative. So if you say something like, be quiet, don't be so talkative, let's have lunch together. Let's have lunch is a special case where it's not I'm telling you to do something, but I'm suggesting that we're going to do something together. And let's originally came from let us, which was a straightforward imperative. Let us meaning let is as the verb. So let us go would be the same as eat now, you know, or eat. But in this case, let us has kind of just become one word, let's. If you were to say to somebody, let us eat now, people would look at you kind of funny because nobody says that anymore. We never separate let's into let us. Let us think about this. Well, maybe in sermons or something they might do something like that. I don't know, because they like to talk in an old style. Let us think about that. So here I've said the unmarked theme. When I use terms marked and unmarked, what I just mean is usual and unusual. So you'll notice when I was reading these first ones, the lion chased the unicorn around the town, all around the town, the lion chased the unicorn, by the lion, the unicorn is chased. Some of these are more common than others, right? And so you'll notice when I read these, I actually stumbled. I didn't read it so smoothly because we don't often say, by the lion, the unicorn was chased around the town. It's a very rare thing to say. You would need a very special context. So one of the aspects in markedness versus unmarkedness is how frequent they are. But what happens is with markedness, or when something is marked, it means it's rare. And so it requires a more special context in order to use it. So you'd have to look pretty hard to find a context where by the lion, the unicorn was chased all around the town would be a natural thing to say. Whereas the lion chased the unicorn all around the town, that's the most unmarked way of saying that. And so that's the most common thing you're going to say, and it's going to be the one that has the least special meaning, the least special context in which it can be used. So this is the idea of marked and unmarked. And what's crucial in this theory is that you always have a choice between a marked and an unmarked choice. So I can choose any one of these depending on the context, but which one I choose will have a different meaning. So if I go with the unmarked choice, then I'll have the unmarked meaning. But if I go with the marked choice, then I'm going to have a more marked meaning. And so this is how we can do the evaluation of texts, is by seeing, okay, the speaker or writer, chose the marked form here, which creates a certain kind of meaning. Is it justified in this case, or should he have gone with the unmarked form and meaning that goes along with that? So this concept of marked and markedness, marked versus unmarked, is going to be very important. So with the imperatives, the unmarked form is, as I mentioned, the most common form is just the predicator, which the verb basically. Again, predicator is more of the functional name we give it because what it's doing is predicating actually based on the same root as indicative. It's dicare, means to say something. So the predicate is saying something about the subject. And so in this case, the predicate would just say it's the verb. So you have the predicator in the most unmarked one, like in 16, be quiet. But in the negative, you can have the finite element, the negated finite element before it. And then in some cases, you can also put in the person you're talking to. So don't you be so nasty or something like that. So you can put the you in there, but that's a more marked form also. It's more emphatic. It's kind of a stronger way of saying it. So imperative is the only type of clause in which the predicator is the unmarked theme. And that's hard to see. Okay, are there any questions basically about the concept of theme before we get into multiple themes? Hopefully it'll become clear when we talk about theme in larger texts that it's really just the starting point for what comes after. So the theme is the starting point and the rheem is what comes after. And as we have a longer text, we're looking at individual sentences, so it kind of doesn't seem so great. But when you look at a longer text, you can see there's a flow to it, and I'll show you some in a minute, where there's a flow to the theme-rheem structure that helps the interpreter, the person listening, to understand what the larger text is all about. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier, the main part of the theme is the topical theme, what the whole utterance is about. But there are other aspects that go into it, like we saw with the finite element coming before the subject. And so what we're going to be doing, just as a quick and dirty way of identifying things that are thematic, is we'll say everything before the topical theme is part of the theme, but it's the topical theme is the main part, and anything after the topical theme is part of the rheem. So the things that can come before the topical theme are the textual themes and interpersonal themes, and they're normally in that order. And I'll give you examples. The textual themes are these things like, there's different types. There's one called continuative, so where you're just kind of continuing or showing that you're continuing the conversation. So you say things, yes, but he's not going to, yes, or so, you know, what do you think about that? Or, yeah, you know, when you, these kind of things that kind of just leading on from what came before. So those are continuative textual themes. They're called textual themes because they're really part of just structuring the message as a message. And then you have structural textual themes, which are actually grammatical in the sense that they create a certain kind of structure. So in English, again, this is very specific to English, you have these words like and, when, but, all of these things I mentioned here, either, then, yet, or, they, because, since, while, although, they actually create a different structure, a grammatical structure. So it's not just that they're linking the two bits together semantically, the way the continuatives are, or some of the modal adjuncts are, but they're actually grammatically creating a different structure. So when you say, you know, they ate lunch and they went to the movies, then it's not just two clauses that happen to be stuck together with and. The and actually puts them together into one sentence. So they grammatically become something different when you use this and. So that's why they're called conjunctions, because they conjoin, put together two things. And in English, these things are obligatorily thematic. In other words, they have to come first. In other languages, that's not the case. So one of the ways that languages differ, I'm going to trip over this eventually. One of the ways that languages differ is what is obligatorily thematic. In other words, what has to come at the beginning. So if you know Chinese, for example, a word like if doesn't have to come at the beginning of the clause. In English, it always has to come at the beginning of the clause. That's a big difference. And so just like the WH word always has to be at the beginning of the clause in English, where it doesn't in Chinese. And so languages differ in terms of the things that they grammatically require you to put in the first position of the clause. Now they do this for a reason. It's just convention. It comes from convention, but it derives from this communicative principle that you want certain types of information to be at the beginning, so it helps the interpreter to interpret your meaning more easily. In Chinese, it's much more straightforwardly just topic comment, and so you can have the topic followed by a word like if, or you know, some other types of thing, because, whereas in English, because or if or whatever has to always come before the topic. Now, and the third type is conjunct, oh wait, no, this one, two, I thought there was a third one. Yeah, structural textual and conjunctive textual theme. So these ones, the third type is the conjunctive textual theme, which is kind of like something like and, but these are phrases that do this kind of linking. We say conjunctive in the sense that they're semantically linking up the different bits, but they're not grammatically linking them up. So, so with these words, they don't necessarily have to come in initial position, and they're not changing the grammatical structure the way and or but or if is changing the grammatical structure. So they're different, but they're all considered types of textual theme because they are affecting how the message is structured. So you have like, nevertheless, the alternative was not an alluring one, and so the teacher left the room when the prince saw Cinderella, but I didn't do it. So in the first one, you have conjunctive because nevertheless, you could put that in any place. You could say the alternative, nevertheless, was not an alluring one, or you could say the alternative was not an alluring one, nevertheless. So that one is more free in its movement. Whereas with the structural ones, like but, you can't say I but didn't do it, or I didn't do it but. That doesn't work. You have to put that one in initial position. Same with although and then. The same with when also. It's also structural. So all of these are structural. So that's the difference between the structural and the conjunctive ones. And then the continuatives in this, as I mentioned, they're obligatorily thematic, but they relate, because they relate two parts of the text. Now, with the, I already said this part. Okay, so moving on to the interpersonal themes, these are the things that are part of what's happening between the people. So it's not building text the way the textual themes are, but they're showing some kind of interaction between the speaker and the hearer. So one of the key things is vocatives. So when you say somebody's name, so I say like, John, could you come over here for a minute? Or, you know, John, I've been thinking about that question. Or, hey, John, let us think about that. So when you say the person's name that you're talking to, you know, it's a way of getting their attention. It's a way of saying to the person, hey, I'm talking to you, right? So it's about what's happening between the two of you. So we call that the interpersonal aspect. And when those come before the topical theme, we consider them part of the theme, and it's the interpersonal theme. So there's also the finite verbal operator in the yes-no things, and also in the imperative. So when you say don't sit down, or when I say do you want to eat, so that is also part of the meaning of what's happening between the speaker and hearer, because it's telling you it's an interrogative. It's telling you I'm asking you a question, or I'm giving you a negative order, you know, telling you don't do something. So that's part of what's happening between the speaker and hearer. So that's, again, interpersonal. And then the modal adjuncts express the speaker's judgment or evaluation of the message. So these are things when you kind of give your subjective take on it. So I say, well, hopefully he'll come today, or probably he'll come today, or occasionally he comes to the office. You know, these kind of things are your kind of little extra subjective thing. It's not really part of the actual, you know, who did what to whom meaning, or the ideational or experiential meaning of John is coming to the office today, but it's your subjective comment on it. So we sometimes call these comment adjuncts. The modal adjuncts are just comments. So you say, if I say to you, honestly, this is not easy, then it means like I'm telling you honestly, you know. So the reason why it's phrased as an adverb is because it's kind of short for I'm telling you honestly, you know, this is not easy stuff. Surprisingly means, oh, it's a surprise to me that he's coming today. You know, so if I say surprisingly he's coming today, it means like I'm surprised. So this is me giving you my subjective, my personal comment on what I'm about to say. So if you say that right up front, then it's part of the theme. Now these things can come at the end, you know. So I could say he's an idiot, frankly. So I could put the frankly at the end, or I could say frankly he's an idiot, or you know no, you wouldn't say he frankly is. Sometimes they can come in the middle, you know, he probably is an idiot, or probably he's an idiot, or he is an idiot probably. You know, that's not really a great example, but anyway, you can, you know, all of these things, in my opinion, frankly, whatever, they do the same type of thing. So here's some examples. So may we have some wine, where the may here is the finite element. In this case, it's a modal verb, but it acts as the finite element. And assuredly, madam, we will grant your request. So here you have assuredly as the modal thing, but then you also have the vocative. So he's talking to somebody that he's calling madam. So it doesn't have to be the person's name. It can just be some title that you're saying. So professor or madam or hey, Butch or something like that. Whatever you want to say, call the person just to get their attention. Or probably the team will win it. So here you're just giving we call modal adjunct, because it's adjunct means something that's not really necessary. So like we have adjunct professors who are not like really regular professors. They're just kind of extras. So an adjunct is something that's just extra. And in this case, it's something you add to the clause, and it's modal just means it's part of this interpersonal meaning. So modal adjunct is something that's added to the clause for this extra interpersonal meaning. So in this case, there probably is a modal adjunct, and the same with assuredly. Whereas if you say, Sam, I want to see your grades, then it's just Sam is the vocative. You're just telling the student, Sam is calling the person's name. Now this is not the subject, so don't confuse vocatives with subjects. That often happens. So think about what it's doing there. If it's just calling the person's name and not part of the grammatical structure of the clause, then it's a vocative. Perhaps they left already, another modal adjunct. Obviously, she doesn't want to go. Again, these are just your personal evaluations. So like with perhaps, these are what we call, in this modality, is kind of the space between yes and no. So if we say yes, they left already, or no, they didn't leave already, but there's this big space in between. Well, they probably left already, or they must have left already, or they should have left already. So there's a big space in between, and that's what we call modality. We'll be talking more about that later, but all of those kind of things fit into this interpersonal theme. So we can put these together. You can have the textual theme, interpersonal theme, and topical theme all together in one sentence, and you can have even more than one type of textual theme, more than one type of interpersonal theme, but you can only have one topical theme in a clause. So, for example, with these, but probably they won't come. So you have the textual theme, in this case, the conjunctive but, then you have the interpersonal probably saying the probability of what it is, and then your topical theme is they won't come. So the thing you're talking about is they, but before you say the subject or topic here, in this case, topical theme, you give your personal take on how likely this is, and you also somehow connecting it to whatever was said before. Now again, we're looking at sentences out of context, but if this was in a larger context, you would think back to that earlier context and know what the connection is about. Or, well, surely you don't mean that. Where again, you say well usually in reaction to something someone else said, and then it's continuing on to what you want to say. And then John, how did they get in? For this reason, sometimes I just don't show up. So each of these is the same kind of situation where you have textual theme followed by interpersonal theme. Now here's the kind of structure I was talking about where you can have as many as 3 textual themes, 3 interpersonal themes, and a topical theme like, well, but then, and surely wouldn't the best idea be to join the group? So all of this stuff up to the best idea, which is the thing you're actually talking about, all of the rest of that is part of the theme, but it's just it's not what you're talking about, but it has this continuative or structural or conjunctive function, and then this interpersonal functions, calling the person's name, giving your interpersonal take on how sure you are of it, and then, in this case, the finite element because you have the negative in there. And it's a question as well. So, so you can see how they can all fit together, and they're still important as the theme because this part is connecting up with what came before, and this part is about the interaction between the speaker and the hearer, and then this part is actually what the speaker is talking about, the topical theme. And then saying something about it, the rheem is what they're saying about the topical theme. So hopefully that's not a difficult concept that you just have, don't laugh. It's just, we're talking about something, right? And so then that's our topical theme, what we're talking about. But then we have these other things that we can also stick at the beginning of the clause to help the hearer understand how what we're saying relates to what came before. That's the textual themes. And also give them some information about our personal way of interacting with them, or just getting their attention if we use a vocative, or giving them our personal evaluation if we use this modal adjuncts. So it's, if you listen to the way people talk, it's very normal. This is not an odd sentence. This is something you will hear. And what's funny is sometimes, like in Australian English, one of the most common continuatives is yeah. And they'll say yeah, even if they follow it by no. They'll say yeah, no. Because the yeah just has a continuative function, and then the no is what they're really saying. But the yeah has this, is a way of just continuing what you're talking about. Okay. Now, any questions up till now before we get into a little bit of detail about WH, the interrogatives and whatnot? Because they're a little bit more complicated. Any questions, or are there some questions? No? I know quite a few of you are not linguists. And last time, by the way, I apologize for not having enough handouts and for everything, because I was told I only had 85, and it ends up we have 103. So I didn't make enough handouts last time. This time, hopefully, there's enough. I made a bunch of extras. And quite a lot of you are not from linguistics, so this may be particularly challenging if you haven't had any background in linguistics. So if you do have questions, please bring them up in class, and don't feel like you'll be the only one, because I'm sure if you ask a question, everybody else will say, thank God she asked that question, because everyone has the same questions. So if you have questions, you can ask them in the lecture, or you can ask them in the tutorial. But like I said, if you have the question, probably everyone has the same question, or almost everyone has the same question. So don't feel hesitant to ask a question. Everything crystal clear? Yeah. Right. Okay. Still no questions? All right. Okay, so one of the little tricky bits is that we have in English, again, this is very specific to English, we have these WH interrogative words, which also function as relative clause, the subjects of relative clauses. So then they kind of have multiple functions. In English, we have separate words for indefinite, we call indefinite pronouns, like whoever, whatever, wherever. Whereas in many languages, like Chinese, you use the interrogative pronouns also as indefinite pronouns. So it works quite differently. In English, though, we use two different types. We have the which, who, what, where as the WH interrogatives, and then we have these relatives, which are basically the same words, but you can also use these whatever, whoever, the indefinite pronouns as well in relative clauses. Now, when I say they're tricky bit, it just means they have double function. As I mentioned earlier when we were talking about, like in the car, how one element can have different functions in different systems. Even within the same system, or it's not really, it's actually still two different systems. So, like with the WH interrogatives, they are, on the one hand, they are very often the subject, but they're also part of the interpersonal theme marking the mood. So because they're marking the mood, we consider them at the same time the interpersonal theme, but also the topical theme. So when I say, who ate the cake? So then the who there is doing two things. One, it's acting as the subject, so it's telling me, the actor, the person who ate the cake. But in this case, because it's a question word, it also has this interpersonal meaning of asking the question. So it also has this interpersonal function. So it's the topic that we're talking about, but it's also, in this case, the asking, telling us it's a question. So it has this double function as both an interrogative, or both interpersonal theme and as topical theme. So that's a little bit of a tricky bit. And the WH relatives, in other words, the WH word that occurs in a relative clause, like the man who just came in, that who is a relative pronoun. And that's also doing this kind of thing. It's at the same time textual theme, because the who there shows the relationship between the man who ate the cake, or whatever, the man who, so the who there is showing the connection to the man. It's marking it as a relative clause, but it's also the topic, the topical theme of that relative clause, because it's representing the participant or the circumstance. So if you say the man who ate the cake, or the place where I grew up, so the where, it would be a circumstance, but it has the same dual function of marking it as a relative clause and also being the topic of the relative clause. So in 37, so where are you going? So that's the where is marking, when I say where are you going, so the where is marking it as a question, but it's also the topical theme because it's a circumstance. In this case, the where, though, remember I said that the topical theme is the participant, process, or circumstance. In this case, the circumstance being the when, where, how, and why. So in this case, it's the where. Wherever you are going, I'm going too. So this is the use of the indefinite phrase, but it's doing the same kind of thing. And in the relative clause, this is the man who came yesterday. So if we're just looking at the relative clause, then the who is kind of linking it to the man, and then it's also the subject of who came yesterday, the person who came yesterday. So this is a little bit of a very idiosyncratic part of English that it does this double function. Okay, we'll take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back and talk about some of the other things. Oh my God. I don't know if everybody's back. During the break, some people told me that I'm speaking too fast, and also that you may not be familiar with some of the terms I'm using, like tense or adverb or finite or things like that. So if that's the case, please ask questions. I'm trying to not assume anything, but it is a lot of material to understand. There's a lot of technical names. We're using the functional terms from within this theory, but there's also, to some extent, using some traditional terms like noun and verb and adverb, adjective, tense, whatever. These are all words that I originally thought you would have learned in school, but maybe not. So if you have any questions, as I was saying to another class, if I had the ability to do this, I would make you signs. And on one side, I would write, speak slower, or slow down. And on the other side, I would just write, huh? So you could just kind of flip the sign, and then I'd know right away. So I'll see about making signs like that. So you can just kind of hold up your sign whenever I say something you don't get. Then you can just say, huh? And so we don't, because once you, but one of the things, if you kind of miss something, just go with the flow. Don't get hung up on it. You know, it's just like when you're listening to a foreign language. Don't try to hang on every word, because if you do that, you miss everything that comes after it. So the way to understand, like any of you study foreign languages, is don't focus on every word. Just use your inferential abilities to figure out what the person is saying. And because once you stop at one word, then you don't hear everything that came after that, and then you're lost completely. So a good technique in trying to understand whatever anybody's saying, whether it's your own language or another language, is not to hang on every word, but because it's really not about interpreting every word, it's about just knowing where the speaker's going. And what we're talking about today, going back to our topic, is all these things that is built into English to help you do that, to help you know where the speaker is going, to project. What we say project means, you know, to guess where the speaker is going. And so the speaker loads this information at the beginning of the clause to tell you, you know, clause, by the way, just means like a short sentence, right? So in case that was confusing you. So the idea is that you're putting this information at the beginning when the speaker starts speaking, so that you have this base in which to make this guess as to which way the speaker is going. And in many cases, like with the interpersonal themes, also giving some of the speaker's attitude. Because from the speaker's point of view, knowing the speaker's attitude is important to the speaker. And so that's why they put it right up in front very often. And so all of that I'm talking about today, as I say, it's a simple idea. It's really just you have what you're talking about and then what you're saying. So that's theme and that's rheem. And all the complications are just all of the things that we build into this first bit. So the theme is this first bit, what you're talking about. But then we're adding these other extra little bits, the textual themes and the interpersonal themes, to help you to know the textual themes, helping you to know how it links to what was said before, and the interpersonal themes giving you this interpersonal aspect of what is the speaker doing with you, and also giving you the speaker's personal attitude or opinion about it. So hopefully this is not a difficult concept. Like I said, it's just these two bits. This is the easiest, actually, of all of the ones we're going to talk about. And so I don't know if the problem is partly the idea of functional structure. So, I mean, it's just one clause. So when you say, what I want for Christmas is my 2 front teeth, it's one clause, but we can look at it from different perspectives. So what we're looking at it from this perspective, where's my clicker? So when we are looking at a clause, what we're just looking at is what is the starting point and what is the rest of it. And so regardless of what kind of sentence it is, whether it's this kind of sentence, where are you going, whatever you're doing, or these kind of sentences, it's the same. It's just saying, okay, what is the first part, and then what is this last part? So what are they talking about? They're talking about they. What about them? They won't come. And this one we're talking about you. What about you? You don't mean that. Or this one, how? A question. How did they get in? So they're asking in what way they got in. Or I just don't show up. So just talking about I. And these other extra bits are just helping you, as I said, in this case, to link it up to what was said before. And these bits are just telling you how certain you are about it, or calling your name, or telling you how often it happens, or giving you my personal, saying that, you know, I'm being honest with you, so giving you a kind of personal take. Or in this case, please is a special one where you're asking somebody to do something, just to make it more polite. So hopefully that isn't really a difficult concept, and as we're going to talk about in a few minutes, it's actually a general principle of the structure of discourse generally. Maybe I should talk about that first and come back. So within the clause, so like in this one we have, monkeys are interesting creatures. They are in many ways like humans, and they are the closest relatives of humans in terms of evolution, being even closer to us genetically than they are to gorillas or orangutans, and so on and so on. So when we look at a passage like this, we can look at the individual sentences. So in this case, monkeys are interesting creatures. So what are we talking about? We're talking about monkeys, right? So monkeys is the topical theme here. It's a participant in being interesting. So they're the ones who are interesting, so the monkeys. They are in many ways like humans. So in this case, we're still talking about them, but here instead of calling them monkeys, we say they. So we use a pronoun they, but it still refers to the monkeys. So this is still the topic. And they are the closest relatives of humans in terms of evolution. So again, we're still talking about they, so it's still just a topic. Being ever closer to us genetically than they are to orangutans. So here the topic is left out because they assume it's the same one. Again, they have a clear social organization. They can use tools. They can be taught simple sign languages. So this is very bad writing. It's like, you know, for little kids, but it's a very clear set of topics, right? So it's basically the same topic over and over again. And in English, you have to repeat the pronoun. So you have to say monkeys and then they and they and they and they. In many languages, you wouldn't have a pronoun there. You would just say whatever you want to say about them, and you would be understood. But in English, we have to repeat the pronoun, unless there's a change here. So then the last sentence is, therefore, we should rethink our attitude towards monkeys. So then the topic changed to we. And then the therefore here is linking this sentence to the rest of this and saying that what I'm saying here is a conclusion that I draw from everything I said before, right? So in this case, this is helping you to understand the relationship between all of this bit and this last bit, right? So this is what thematic structure is about. That's what we're talking about, is theme, rheem. So the first sentence, the monkeys is the theme, are interesting creatures is the rheem. They is the theme, are in many ways like humans is the rheem, and so on and so on. So it's relatively straightforward. Now, when I say this is a general principle, is that in larger structures like this one, the first clause, like monkeys are interesting creatures, is also the theme for the whole rest of the paragraph. So, and why is that? Because when you say monkeys are interesting creatures, why do you start off with a sentence like monkeys are interesting creatures? Why would you start off your paragraph about that? What are you doing by having a sentence like that? Huh? Yeah, you're introducing the topic. You're saying, this is what I'm going to talk about. So I'm saying monkeys are interesting creatures, and then all the rest of it is saying how they are interesting creatures. So your first clause there, your first sentence is introducing the topic that monkeys are interesting creatures. And so now I'm going to tell you why they are interesting creatures, because they are in many ways like humans, and they're our closest relatives, and they are genetically close, and they have clear social organization. So these are all reasons why monkeys are interesting creatures. So it's the same principle that you have at the beginning, what am I going to talk about? And then the rheem is what I'm saying, what it is I'm saying about this topic. So it's exactly the same structure. And then whole narratives and longer discourse can have that as a paragraph. So when you write, when you get to your FYP, or even when you just do a term paper, you know, if you do a paper for a course, you start off with an introductory paragraph. And so that introductory paragraph is your theme paragraph for the rest of your paper. And then when you write your FYP, you have to write several chapters. And so then your first chapter is your intro chapter, which is the theme chapter for all of the other chapters, because that tells you what am I going to talk about. And then the other chapters are what you're saying about that thing you said you're going to talk about. So it's the same exact principle of you have a starting point or a topic, thing you're going to talk about, and then what you say about it. And so that principle is operative at all levels. Not only higher levels, but even at lower levels. Like when we talk about below the clause, like in noun phrases and whatnot, you find the same principle. So it's a really crucial part. As I said, it's part of general cognitive ability that you set up a topic and you then say something about it. I mean, this is very common. And the most common pattern you find in languages, English is actually typologically, you know, in terms of you compare it to other languages in the world, it's actually a pretty weird language. As those of you who are non-natives would realize, it's a bizarre language. But we somehow have managed to use it anyway. But most languages have very simple structure, which is just topic comment. And because topic comment is the most common or the most basic way that humans think. You think of something and you say something about it. So this, what about it? You know, this, what about it? And so that's all theme rheem is about. And it's just English has grammaticalized certain structures. When I say grammatical, it just means it's certain conventionalized certain structures that we normally use. That's all grammar is really. It's just kind of restricting the number of choices you have in what you can use. So like having and but they have to come in initial position. So that's what we call grammaticalized. It means it becomes part of the grammar, a forced choice. It's not a choice. It then becomes not really a choice. So whole narratives and longer discourse can have a topic paragraph that acts as a theme, and then within a single sentence you can also have this. So when you say something like, when the bow breaks, the cradle will fall, you can break this into theme and rheem, like so you can have a textual theme, topical theme, and then rheem. But then this whole first clause, when the bow breaks, actually functions as a theme for the cradle will fall. So it's again the same principle. You're going from the clause to complex sentence to paragraph to like a paper and then to a book. It's all the same principle. If he comes, tell me. If the sky clears, we can go out. So it's all this same kind of principle of just one part being a basis on which another part can be said. That's really what it is. Think of it that way. So it's kind of setting the base for something you want to say. So that base can include linking back to the earlier text. It can include some interpersonal aspect, and it can include the topic. All right. So one choice that we have in doing this, because we want to have topic and the rest of it, or topic and comment, you know, the thing we're talking about, and then the rest of it. One aspect of that is deciding what we want to make kind of understood already, kind of old information and new information. And one of the principles of theme rheem is that we normally have new information at the end of the clause, in English at least, and old information at the beginning of the clause. And so we have ways of moving things around in the sentence to keep that balance, you know, with the new information at the end and the old information at the beginning. And the reason for this is because the old information, again, acts as your base for understanding the new information. And so it's the same principle. You have your base and then some new information you're adding. So your base is the kind of stuff you already can identify or already know, and then the new information is added to that. And that's how you make sense of stuff, right? So one way we do this is like if we're already talking about what I want for Christmas, right? So this would only be used in a context where you're talking about what I want for Christmas. And so your starting point is what I want for Christmas. You can put that as your theme. So this is actually functioning as a single noun, as your topical theme, what I want for Christmas. So it's really a participant in this case, the thing that I want. And then, so you put your new information at the end. So the thing that I want, this is my topic, is the thing that I want is my two front teeth. This is from a song. You know, all I want for Christmas is my new front teeth, my two front teeth. I don't know if you ever heard that, but anyway, it's real English. So this is just putting this bit, because normally you'd say, I want my two front teeth for Christmas. But if we already know that what we're talking about is what I want for Christmas, then putting the Christmas bit at the end is kind of not helpful to the hearer in terms of identifying what's the new bit. So you help the hearer identify the new bit by putting it at the end. And it also gives it a kind of contrastive sense. So in this case, when you say, what I want for Christmas is my two front teeth, makes it look like, well, that's the only thing I really want. It's contrasting with everything else that I might want. And then, or you could say, somebody said something, and we know somebody said something, and then you say, well, what did he say? Then you'd say, well, what he said was he couldn't care less. So the what he said is already kind of information that everybody knows he said something, and he just wants to know what it was that he said. So you can start with that. That can be your theme. What he said, which is again a participant, it's the kind of thing he said. So the thing he said was he couldn't care less. So then again, you put your new information at the end of the clause, because that's what the hearer really pays most attention to, is actually the end of the clause, because we have this general principle of old at the beginning, new at the end. And so the thing that the hearer is going to pay attention to is more the bit at the end. And that's why we also, when we speak, with our the way we use our intonation, we don't say, what I want for Christmas is my two front teeth. I mean, some Brits talk like that, and it's hard to understand. But normally we'd say, what I want for Christmas is my two front teeth. So you have this more emphasis on the last part, because that's the part, that's the kind of new information that you want the hearer to particularly pay attention to. The hearer already knows that we're talking about what I want for Christmas, so you don't have to put extra emphasis on that. The part that's new is the part you need to put extra emphasis on. So what he said was he couldn't care less. So then you would put more stress on that last bit. Or my two front teeth are what I want for Christmas. So this one you could turn it around, but it would be, as I said, marked, which means it's less usual because it's putting the new bit at the beginning. Now we can do that if we want, and there may be some context when you can do that, but we normally don't. That's why it's called a marked structure, because it's unusual. Normally we put the new information at the end. And so this so-called thematic equative clause, that's a very fancy name. In traditional grammar, it's called a pseudo-clef construction. All it means is putting the kind of topic, this kind of representation of the topic, what you're talking about, in this structure, and then just it's equative in the sense that you can think of this like an equal sign. So you say, this is this. So this is this. What I want for Christmas is this. Or this is what I want for Christmas. So it's just like an equation. That's why it's called equative clause. And now similar to that is what's called a predicated theme or a clef construction in traditional grammar. And in this case, it's again helping the hearer to identify what's the old information and what's the new information, but in a slightly different way. In this case, you have this small clause here, it is money that they want, or it was John who ate the cookies. Now we could have said this as what they want is money, the one who ate the cookies was John, the one who told about the incident wasn't me. So you could use that equative clause that we just talked about to say these same kind of things, and that would put is money, was John, wasn't me at the end. But in this case, this is an alternative structure for doing the same thing, where the it is just kind of a dummy it, And then this is the new bit, saying, okay, that they want this is kind of already understood in this case, and this is the kind of new information. And so the reason why we can do this, the it really kind of refers to this, or this, or in this case, this one. And so I'm not doing well with this one, am I? Let me see how. So when you have this bit is already kind of understood. So we know that somebody told him about the incident. We know that somebody told him about the incident. Or we know that somebody ate all the cookies. Or we know that they want something. Now, the reason why you can just put an it here is because it's already known. And because we know we're talking about that, I can just, this whole back part is not even necessary. So if you were asking me, what is it they want? And I can say it's money. It's money that they want. Or you could just say it's money. Or you could just answer money. Or who ate the cookies? I could say it was John. And I could leave off who ate the cookies because that's already understood. The it there is already referring to who ate all the cookies. And so this is really, damn, I hate this thing. This is already kind of, the it is referring to the same thing. So it isn't actually necessary to have both of them. I could, as I said, put this at the beginning, and the one who ate the cookies was John, but instead we say it was John. And then, to make clear who it refers to, and you would say who ate the cookies, the one who ate the cookies. So it's doing the same thing by isolating the new bit from the old bit. But in this case, and in both cases, this new bit comes after the finite element. It comes after this equational verb. And this is a general, very common structure you find in all languages. So putting the new information in a structure like this kind of so-called cleft structure. Cleft, I should explain, comes from the verb to cleave, which is not a word you probably use very often. But you may know cleaver, right? You know the Chinese cai dao? If you have those choppers, the Chinese choppers, that's called a cleaver. And the reason why it's called a cleaver is because it cleaves. Cleave means to cut. So these are called cleft sentences. Cleft is just a past participle, or I shouldn't use terms like that. It's a form of the verb to cleave when it's in the past or something. I don't know how to talk about it. Anyway, so cleft means something that was cut, something that was cleaved. We don't say cleaved, it was cleft. So something that was cut is called cleft. So a cleft structure, the reason why this is called a cleft construction, or the other one is pseudo-cleft, means that the original sentence was cut and moved around. So in this case, they want money was cut, and then the two bits were moved. So they want money, where money was at the end of the clause, and then they cut it, and then they moved it like that. So that's why it's called a cleft construction, because it's cut. So that's why I said CF money is what they want. So you could say it this way. You could say money is what they want. What they want is money. It is money that they want. I mean, all of those have the same function in terms of setting off money from what they want, because what they want is already understood. And so these are all just different ways of setting off this kind of new information from the old information. And that's a lot of what theme rheem is doing generally. Now an easier one, hopefully, is pre-post theme, which we just call topicalization, where instead of using a passive or some other way of putting things in the beginning of the clause, you can just move. It's often thought of as moving. It's you can move, so you say, now Sam Jones is a real smart guy. Instead of saying now Sam Jones is a real smart guy, you can make Sam Jones a separate topic in front of the clause and say Sam Jones, now he's a real smart guy, or that chest, the garbage man already took it away, or that car you sold last week, was it still running? So in this case, this is a theme acting as a topic, but it's not the subject. The actual subject is here, where the he or it is not even the subject. Here it's the object. And then that car you sold last week, was it still running? So here the it refers to that car that you sold last week. So one way of thinking about this is that some grammarians have done, I don't believe this, but some people talk about it, is that what you've done is moved from the garbage man already took that chest away, so you've moved the word that chest to the beginning and you put a pronoun in its place. So you can think of it that way, what we call topicalization. In this kind, there's two kinds of topicalization in English. In this type, you have to have a pronoun in the clause in the normal position where you would expect it. So with Sam Jones is the one who's a smart guy, so you have to have the word he there. You can't say Sam Jones, now a real smart guy. Or that chest the garbage man already took away. Actually, you could say that. But that's a different structure. And I don't have that one. There is another type of preposing or putting a topical where you don't have a pronoun in here. So if I say like grapes I really like. So if I instead of saying I really like grapes, I can say grapes I really like. So that's a kind of topicalization also. But that one I don't have the pronoun there. I don't have to say grapes I really like them. I can just say grapes I really like. Or in this case, the difference between that chest, the garbage man already took it away, as opposed to that chest, the garbage man already took away. So the first one is has this pronoun here, which represents the same thing, and the second one doesn't have it. Now, we don't care about that right now, so don't worry about it, and I shouldn't have even brought it up. But for our purposes, in terms of theme and rheem, the important thing is that anything can be moved to the beginning to be the theme, and that's all we really care about. So whatever it is you want to talk about, whatever is your starting point, you can make that your theme. And there are different ways to do it. And so all the things I've been talking about are just different ways to put something at the beginning and be what you're talking about. So in this case, you want to talk about Sam Jones, or you want to talk about that chest, you want to talk about that car you sold last week. Whether or not you have a resumptive pronoun, it's still the same. From the theme rheem point of view, it's still the same. That you decide to put a certain aspect in this topical position because that's the main focus of what you want to do, the topic, the thing you really want to talk about. And you want the speaker to be sure that they're clear on what it is you're talking about. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay, we already talked about this. Oh, this is going to be painful. There is something that happens in language, which is talked about in a book as grammatical metaphor. And you know, in metaphor, hopefully you do know what metaphors are. Metaphor is when something that is normally used for one thing is used for something else. So, like if I say, oh, he's a pig, right? So normally we don't call people pigs, but if I call somebody a pig, then it's a metaphorical use. So I'm saying it has some characteristics of a pig, which of course is different between Chinese and English, by the way. If you call somebody pig in English, it means they're sloppy. If you call somebody a pig in Chinese, it means they're stupid. It's very different, very, very different use of the metaphor. But anyway, so the same concept happens with other things, like in grammatical structures. So our grammatical structures develop for a particular purpose, just like the word pig developed for a particular purpose to refer to this little animal that goes, you know, kind of thing. But it can be used for other things, like a person who goes, or whatever, somebody you don't like. So then, with the grammatical structure, you take, for example, as I mentioned earlier, we have the interrogative mood, we have the declarative mood, and we have the imperative mood. And so normally, a declarative mood would be used for making statements, and an interrogative mood would be used for asking questions, and an imperative mood would be used for giving orders. Do we do that all the time? Can you think of other ways to give somebody an order, or to, how would you do it? You're saying yes. Yeah, so you can use a question, you can use an interrogative. So he's saying, would you turn off the lights? So if you wanted somebody to turn off the lights, rather than saying turn off the lights using an imperative mood, you can use an interrogative mood and say, would you turn off the lights? Or could you turn off the lights? Or it's dark in here. You can make a statement. Or it's too bright in here, you know, asking them to turn off the lights. So you can make a statement, or you could ask a question when really your intention is to get them to do something. So your goal is like an imperative, but you don't use an imperative, you use a different structure for that same purpose. So that's a metaphorical use of that. So we call that grammatical metaphor, when you use a structure that developed for one thing to do something else. So that's one example, is when you use like an interrogative form to give an order. Or you can also use a declarative, like students will all put away their phones during class. So that's an order, but it's in the form of a statement. And so that's grammatical metaphor, when you use something that developed for one purpose for a different purpose. Now, one of the things that's happened in English is that some patterns that developed for an ideational purpose, in other words, experience to represent experience, are now sometimes being used for an interpersonal meaning. So for example, I don't think, like when you say, I don't think he will come, the meaning of the first part is really, I don't think. In other words, that, you know, I'm not thinking something. It doesn't have its really theme-rheem structure. It's actually become part of the theme, where it has this interpersonal thing of just, it's almost like saying, I doubt he will come, or or probably he won't come, something like that. So when you say, I don't think he will come, the way you can test this is when you wouldn't say, I don't think he will come, do I, right? So one way of finding out what's really going on in the sentence is to use a tag question. And the tag question is like, you say, he's coming today, isn't he? So that isn't he, that's a tag question. Now, this doesn't work for Singlish, because in Singlish you just say, isn't it? All the time. But in standard American and British English and Australian English, you use the subject and the finite of the main clause in the tag. So you'd say, he's coming today, isn't he? I'm standing here, aren't I? So then you have this matching between the subject of the clause and the subject of the tag question, and then the auxiliary verb that's used actually is the same, but the difference in one negative, one positive. So you can use that as a test of what's really happening in the clause, and we'll talk more about that next week or next time. And so here, if I was to say, I don't think he will come, if I put a tag question on that, it wouldn't be, I don't think he will come, do I? It would be, I don't think he will come, will he? So it shows that the I don't think is not acting as the main part of the clause. It's just functioning as this interpersonal part. So this is actually altogether part of the interpersonal theme. So we can just think of this as interpersonal theme, and then the topical theme is the part of the clause that we're really talking about, the he will come, or what it will be ever finished, or the he as in he's a twit, isn't he? So from one point of view, we could break this down into theme and rheem, but on a higher level, it makes more sense to just think of I don't think, or I don't believe, or I dare say, or I doubt, or just as some kind of interpersonal aspect. And then another thing that's going in this direction is when you say something, it's amazing that he got out alive. But in this case, this is not so fully conventionalized, because you can say it's amazing that he got out alive, isn't it? And there you could use the thing, but it seems to be going in that direction. Okay, now getting to this theme rheem in the longer text. As I was talking about with the monkey text, the themes are kind of like signposts along the way. They're taking you through the text, because we don't normally just talk in individual sentences. We normally have a whole string of things we're going. And so we have this choice of what to pick as our theme in each step of the way through whatever it is we're talking about. And so there's a regularity to that. And so, you know, what I call here predictable pattern, that's the regularity to it, where very often the new information will be introduced in the rheem and then made the theme of the next clause. So if we look at this passage, all children want to have a good teacher. A good teacher must be fair and reasonable. He or she must work at a sensible pace. The pace should be determined by the ability of the children, so the children can follow all the lessons. If the children have worked hard during the week, there should be some fun activities. That is what I think a good teacher should be like. So we will have some fun activities later. No. Unfortunately, when you get to college, we don't do that. University, I should say. In America, college and university are the same thing. So we don't talk about going to university, say go to college. Whereas for you guys, college means secondary school. In America, secondary school is not called college. Anyway, so when I say college, I mean university. So in this case, we have our topical themes, and you can see how our first clause, where again the first clause can be taken as a theme for the rest of it, because we're talking about what? A good teacher. So in our first clause, our topic is all children, but then we introduce this idea of good teacher. So then what happens? So then we make good teacher the theme, the topical theme of the next clause. And then we say something that the teacher must be fair and reasonable. And then we continue with that same topic, he or she must work at a sensible pace. So now we're introducing a new thing, which we were talking about, the pace. And then we make the pace the topic of the next clause, and we say the pace, we want to say more about that. So we make that the topic of the next clause, and we say the pace should be determined by the ability of the children. So then we're back to the children, which we started with. So then they become the topic again. So the children can all follow the lessons. If the children have worked hard during the week, there should be some fun activities. So in this case, we've got the children and then the children again, and then there should be some fun activities. This is kind of like a dummy, but it's still saying that in that situation, there should be some fun activities. That is what I think a good teacher should be like. Now, what is this that doing there? Huh? Yeah, it's kind of summarizing this whole bit and then making a final statement. So that, where that makes you think back to all of these things we said here, and then what about that, well, is what I think a good teacher should be like. So very often, just like we have the theme at the beginning, you also have a conclusion at the end. And so this conclusion, this is what I think it should be like. And then the that here is referring back to all of this other stuff. So it's a very natural type of theme to have, is saying, okay, everything I said before, what about it, is what I think a good teacher should be like. So if we diagram this, we see that we have the initial theme, and then we have something introduced in the rheem, which then becomes the theme. That theme is continued, a new something is introduced in the rheem in 3, then that becomes the rheem and the theme in 4. Something new is introduced in rheem 4, and that becomes the theme of rheem 5. That's continued as the theme of rheem 6, and then so on and so on. So this is a very normal kind of pattern. The monkey one was really very rigid, whereas they. That's kind of boring. You often try to have more of a, you want an easy to understand flow, but it doesn't have to be very strictly exactly the same topic all the time. But so this kind of thing where you introduce something in the rheem and then make the theme and then either continue with that or introduce a new something to become. This is the way you often find in the text. And so when you're doing, this is what we call it the thematic structure of the flow of the themes. When you look at this, and remember I mentioned last time Michael Halliday, when he was looking at the Darwin's The Origin of Species in the Chinese translation, this is what he was comparing, that how this flow worked in the English, in Darwin's original text, and then how the flow worked in the Chinese text, and showed that the flow was very different. The choice of themes, what was chosen to be in the theme, what was chosen to be in the rheem, was different in the two texts. And so then the overall understanding of the text comes out very different, because you've chosen different things to be in the theme and the rheem. So it really affects how the person understands the text. So when you, so let me give you an example, a real example from my own writing. Sorry, I'm losing my throat. I've been lectures all week. This was the paragraph that I originally wrote when I first wrote this what do you call, these slides. Sorry. So when I first wrote these slides, I wrote the predicator, the function of be in 16 is the unmarked theme in second person imperative. This is from an earlier slide. In second person imperatives, though, is it possible to have a pronoun or do plus predicator as marked theme? In negative imperatives, the unmarked theme is don't plus the following subject, or don't plus the predicator. In first person imperatives, let's is the unmarked theme. Imperative is the only type of clause in which the predicator is the unmarked theme. So this is the first type. Now our themes, we have the predicator as the theme here. So the predicator is the theme here. In negative imperatives is the theme in the second one. And then you have in first person imperatives as the theme in the third one, and then imperative as the theme in the fourth sentence. Now compare that to this one, where I've changed the order of theme and rheem. So in this one, I start off with the theme as in non-negative second person imperatives. And then the second theme is in negative second person imperatives. So you can see this is non-negative second person imperative, this is negative second person imperatives. So there seems to be a relationship, or at least some kind of logical relationship between the first theme and the second theme. And then the third theme is in first person imperatives, and then the last one is imperative. So that was my second try. Now we have a third try. And this is, if you're a good writer, this is what you do. You play with it. You see, okay, which order of these things makes the most sense. So in the third one, I start off with the theme as being the unmarked theme. Okay, so now what I'm talking about is what is the unmarked theme? It's very clear. In this first two, I was talking about the predicator. And in the second one, I'm talking about in non-negative second person imperatives. Is that really clear where I'm going? In the third one, in the third one, the unmarked theme, the whole paragraph is really about the unmarked theme. So I should start with that. So I start with the unmarked theme in non-negative second person imperatives is the predicator. And then the unmarked theme in negative second person imperatives. And then the unmarked theme in first person imperatives. So here, straightforwardly, I'm telling you that in each case, I'm talking about what is the unmarked theme in these different situations. And then the last one is the same. Imperative is the only one I'm talking about. So you can see by comparing these three different versions of the same, this is very real. I mean, this is some that, I was experimenting with these different ways of writing a particular paragraph. And you can see how they affect your ability to understand what's going on by putting the key kind of thing you're talking about as your thematic element. It helps the reader to know what you're talking about, and then how to relate that along the larger text. Is that clear to everybody? So, it's just a general principle that be clear from the beginning about what you're talking about, and then say what you've got to say about it. And then the other part about the theme rheem is that very often we introduce new elements in the rheem, because that's the kind of new information, where the new information goes. Okay, so I've given you already, we have the thing, so I've put this in. If you want to play with this a little bit, you can do some extra practice. Analyze the clauses of the monkey text into theme and rheem, but I already did that in class, so you don't have to worry about that. And then you can look at these other ones. So we can just do this, since we have a couple of minutes, we can just do this in class. So are you going to Scarlet Fair? This is from a song also. So what do we have here? What's the topical theme to start off with? Huh? You, somebody said it. You is the topical theme. Are you? And the mood of this clause, right? This is a question, so it's interrogative. So that before the topical theme, we have the finite element in initial position, marking this as an interrogative, a yes/no interrogative. So this one, basically, you have an interpersonal theme, which is the finite element, the R, and then you have the subject, the you, as the topical theme. Now, how about probably we're going tomorrow afternoon? I am not really hearing anything I understand. So what's the topical theme? We, not the R, just the we is the topical theme. And then what is probably doing there? Interpersonal theme, because it's doing what? It's modal, yeah, but what is it doing? That's what we care about. I don't care about the names. I just want you to know what it's doing. Yeah, you're telling your judgment about how likely it is. It's probably we're going tomorrow. So I'm not 100% sure. If I was 100% sure, I'd just say we're going tomorrow. And if I was 100% sure we weren't going, I'd say we were not going tomorrow. But I say probably we're going tomorrow means I don't know yes or no. I'm telling you that right up front. Okay, remember me to the one who lives there. Remember, yeah, somebody said it. So remember is the theme here because it's a imperative clause, yes. So in an imperative, the unmarked theme is the verb itself, the predicator. Okay, because she once was a true love of mine. These are all from the song, actually, these three. So because she once was a true love of mine, what is the topical theme? She, right. And what is because doing? Textual, yeah, because it's linking up with the part before, right? Because there must be some reason why you said this. These actually go together. Remember me to the one who lives there because she once was a true love of mine. So it's linking up to the whatever came before that. So this is a famous line from the movie Gone with the Wind. Frankly, Scarlett, I don't give a damn. So what's the theme here? Somebody said I is the topical here. What is Scarlett doing there? Yeah, it's just evocative. He's just talking to Scarlett. This is Clark Gable talking. Well, he's not holding her in that scene. That's a famous scene. But he's about to leave, and he's talking to Scarlett, and she said something, and he responds, "Frankly, Scarlett, I don't give a damn." So Scarlett is just saying her name because he's talking to her, and it kind of makes it more emphatic. And then what is frankly doing? Yeah, it's just giving his kind of saying, I'm telling you frankly, or giving his personal attitude towards it. So, and as we'll talk later, using words like damn also is part of interpersonal meaning, showing your attitude. But here we're only talking about theme and rheem. So this is both interpersonal theme, and then this is the topical theme. Okay? Hopefully that's getting a little bit clearer. Yes, no, maybe? Okay, that's all for today then. Thanks. Thanks.